Hello and welcome to episode 2 of this Let's Play Factorio Space Exploration series. In the last video, the first video of the series, we built a nice big starter factory, and hopefully this is going to give us all of the things we need. I'm not certain of that fact, but we'll find out one way or the other as we progress. The next thing on the agenda is to start building the main factory. And I've got a picture in my mind of the thing that I want to build, and the picture means I need to make more space, make more room so that I can expand. I need to defeat some biters. I need to move the perimeter wall out. That is the first thing, and then I can start building a factory. That's the general direction of travel. So let's crack on. Alright, so some long stretch of time has passed and nothing has happened in the factory, as you can see. And there's a really good reason for that. So I set out on a course of action. I built my iron block and my steel block. I'm going to put the time lapse up here because it's now going to go in the bin because we're going back a few steps. I built this whole iron setup. Really happy with it. And then I spent 8 minutes talking about this really good iron setup and how happy and proud I was of it. And then once I'd got the block down, and I was just starting to delete it, so that I was just starting to remove it so that I could start planning where it was actually going to go in the base, because I was just kind of planning it out on the map. Just wanted to see how it played out. I was just trying to figure it out. And I had a comment on episode 1. And that comment was that I hadn't set up the map properly, there's like a special game mode just for space exploration, and it's best to set up the map using those defaults because of reasons with biters. And I hadn't done that, so I was trying to get to the bottom of whether that was something I needed to start again. I didn't really want to start again. I'm already 30 hours deep into this. The starter factory was very grindy. I did not want to do that again. So, in getting to the bottom of whether that was relevant or not, which is what I've decided is that it isn't, and I'm going to carry on this course of action with the biters being slightly more difficult than they probably should be, and I'm going to deal with that. As a result of that, I started having another conversation with a friend of mine on Discord, and he pointed out a whole load of things that I wasn't aware of about SpaceX, and that led me to believe that this iron block that I was building in the background, it was not the right way to go. I was progressing in the wrong direction. So I wasted, I don't know, several hours building that block, and I don't know whether it's going to come in useful or not. I mean, will I? We'll see. I don't know. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm just going to keep it. It did take quite a while to build. But the end point of this whole rambling nonsense is that the plan that I had for where I was going to go, the way I was going to build this factory, was completely wrong. And what I'm going to do instead, what my original plan was just to do what I always do, and just to go really big. I mean, look at this block. I was going to have, I don't know, 10 of these blocks next to each other, dealing with iron on this base, in this base factory, on this planet. That's what I was going to do, but that's completely the wrong approach, I think, in hindsight, particularly with this being my first go at it. I think what I need to do is I need to keep things much more simple. So I'm going to scale back my aspirations for this factory and just try and aim for getting to rocket launches. Let's just explore this properly. Let's get to the grips with the game mechanics in the right way. And I don't need a big factory to be able to achieve that. I need a big factory to achieve my vanity. I want a big factory because I like big factories, but we're dealing with multiple planets, and I don't really know how that's going to work out. So I'm going to scale back my aspirations. I'm going to make things much, much simpler. I'm going to aim for a factory which just gets to a rocket launch, just gets me to that point, and then, you know, the discussion that I had was that I'm going to have to be bringing in a whole load of iron into my base factory, iron ingots specifically, because that's the best way of getting it from space. Because there's not much iron on the map, and the iron that I do have, I am depleting very, very quickly, just building the factory itself, because we've got all of these processes. So it's been a whole afternoon of discussion. I've been sitting here for a good few hours talking about how I want to do this, because the way that I normally would approach it and the way that I was planning to approach it is now gone. So I need to take a step back. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I think what I've decided, what the ultimate, I think I was the ultimate was that I was approaching the wrong direction. Iron was the wrong thing to start with. I think the thing to start with is with these core mining things, because we can get access to. Oh, I've already, here we go. I've just researched it because it's relevant. Once we process these core fragments, we get all of this medley of goodies, and you know, the thing that immediately pops out to me is pyroflux. You know, I was under the impression that that was going to be something that I wasn't going to be able to access till I got to space, but clearly I can have some of it on this planet. So I'm going to set up some kind of core fragment processing, and then I'm going to set up I'm going to go from there. I'm going to build the factory a much smaller version of the one that I had planned, but the same basic architecture, just much, much smaller. And I'm still not quite sure whether it's worthwhile having trains. Is it worthwhile having trains? I mean, I suppose I am going to be bringing in ore from from around the map. It would make sense to have trains. But this is only going to be a small map. I can just bring it in. I might just bring it in with conveyor belts. Undecided. Still don't know. I really need to figure that out before I get started. But let's play around with some recipes and see if I can get a handle on this new direction that I want to progress in. Ugh. Not small or modest by any stretch of the imagination. That fact has not passed me by. But you know, in fairness to me, look at, you know, if I just go to the recipes, we are going to get out basically 108 copper and 108 iron. You know, barely anything. You know, I was looking at the oil, and in order to process this amount of oil, we need, like, what is it? 18 refineries. You know, this whole setup is slow and cumbersome, and that's why it's big. Now, just to take you through how it works. So, I mean, I think it's mostly straightforward. We've got a lot of liquids, lots of liquids that potentially could overflow and jam up the system. So, we've got the main units, these pulverizers, which are going to pulverize this core fragment. And then in between all of these pulverizers, we've got some flares and some tanks. So these should just flare off each of these relevant liquids. I've had a check through. I'm pretty sure we can flare off all of this stuff, including the water, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But I think I found a formula in there for it to go into a flare. Anyway, we can figure that out. There's space in here. We can jerry rig something in if need be. So the core fragments come in, the liquids go out, and if there's too much, then they get flared off. The rest of the stuff, because we have a whole load of, we've got these 6 different ore types that come out. So they kind of come out on this red belt, get moved onto what I used to call a sorting belt, but it's not really much of a sorting belt. So it kind of, it's this tiny little loop. So another one comes from these respective pulverizers from this side, and they just exit off depending on which resources, you know, if it's coal, it goes up here. Copper, it goes up here. Now I used to call this a sorting belt because I sort of made my first sorting belt back when the days when you couldn't filter stuff with a splitter. So it was a sorting belt because I had to use filter inserters to pick up off of it. And then one day I turned it on and I had access to splitters which could do the same job. And you know, filter inserters, they would miss the occasional piece of ore, whereas these things are 100% efficient, so much better. Anyway, that's what these belts are doing in here. So they're going to pick up all of this ore and then shift it to wherever it needs to go in the respective part of my factory, which obviously I haven't built yet. Then we've got the various pipes and the inputs for the core fragment. But overall, we need a lot of these things to deal with what the plan was, because I wanted to base this on some kind of number. So the plan, because obviously we get each what is it called? Do I even have one? Here we are. Each core mining drill that we place down reduces its efficiency, and if we double the amount of core mining drills we have down, then we only get like 40%. We get the square root of that double back again. So they reduce in efficiency the more of them we have. And the number that I've tried to come up with something sensible. So I've got 6 of them coming in. I need 6 core mining drills in order to satisfy this factory. These will need to be blue belts when that becomes the case. But for the moment I've only got red, so that's what they'll do. I think I've got 6 or 7 of them in easy access. You know, part of my problem is that, well, these two, this one here and this one here, they're going to be right in the way of where I think my factory is going to go. So it's entirely possible that I'll need to get rid of these 2 somehow. So that leaves me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So of the 6, I've got the 5 that I probably need, and I need to find another one. I don't know whether that's sensible, you know, how many of these things there are. And for the sake of, you know, simplicity, because these core mining drills are permanent, you know, they're not going to deplete. I'm going to route it all in with conveyor belts. I'm not going to do trains. You know, I can just stick it on a conveyor belt. It doesn't need to have that variability. The trains, you know, in essence, this thing now is going to feed most of, well, it's going to do a lot of the work for the factory. You know, it's going to provide a lot of the iron, the copper, and all these other things. I'm also going to supplement these things with more, so that what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a part of the, when I get to the iron, which I'm just about to start, I'm going to have a part of it which deals with the iron ore which comes out of here, completely disconnected from any of the trains. And then I'm going to have another section which deals with iron ore which comes off the trains, which will be, I don't know, probably double the amount of iron and copper that I'm producing here. So this will produce half the amount of iron and copper that the base needs, and then I'll bring in another 50% from iron and copper around the place, because these ore patches are depleting very quickly. So this is a complicated mess. You know, one ingredient in this mess in the pulverizers can block up the whole process. So I need to bring something new in, but equally those ore patches deplete quickly. So I don't want to rely on it too much. So 50-50, I think that's about right. And what would that give me? That would give me, diddly diddly dee, where are you? Here. 216. That's a decent amount of iron and copper, I reckon. I think that will get the job done. You know, ultimately, I'm trying to. What I want to do is I want to get something that's better than my starter factory by a factor of 2 or 4. You know, that's really what I'm aiming at. I think my starter factory can produce 30 iron. 45 iron, 45 copper is what I'm producing in my starter factory at the moment. So if I can get 3-4 times that, then that's a good number. That's the kind of the range that I'm looking for. It's got to be that starter factory. There's no point building a whole main base and it just doing what the starter factory can do. That's just anyway. Next is iron. So let's move the camera. Let's get on with the next thing. So it's starting to feel like solid progress is being made. Solid progress, not spectacular, but solid. Just slow and steady. The way I generally do things. So this is my iron setup, and as is always the case when I build this stuff, I don't really want to demolish. I don't really want to have to come back and do this again. So this is the final version. This is the version with ingots. And because we don't have access to pyroflux or the smelting technique in order to create those ingots right off the bat, I've had to kind of make it kind of like a little bit of a Swiss Army knife to deal with both kind of situations. So at the beginning, when we don't have access to ingots or the technology, then we'll enrich the iron just like we would normally. The enriched iron will come down, it will get fed into these furnaces. Now there's two banks of these furnaces. We've got one bank here and we've got one bank down here. And the reason is because I like to, when I'm dealing with lots of fluids or high volumes of fluid, and that's what we're dealing with here with iron. What have we got? We've got 1,125. So that's one in each of these three. We've got 1,125. That's a lot of liquid to try and manage. And what I'd like to do in those sort of situations is to put the thing producing the liquid in the middle of the things using the liquid. So these are the casting machines that are going to use that liquid, and so are these. And then we're going to have more input of liquid from these furnaces, and that will kind of go both ways, up and down. So I'm trying to get a good distribution of liquid through the system. That's kind of the goal. And as I was going through it, in the intermediate solution when we don't have access to ingots, the enriched iron will just go in here, go into these furnaces, and then come out as an iron plate. And that will feed into the rest of the system. Once we get access to pyroflux and the technology that unlocks it, then we can put pyroflux into this pipe, and we can change the use of these furnaces from the ones with the creating iron plate from enriched iron into one creating molten iron from enriched iron. And then this conveyor belt won't be used anymore, and it will just output outwards. So to start with, this pipe isn't being used, it's going to be empty. I might put pyroflux in it, but it's not going to be used by the furnaces. And then in the end situation, this pipe's going to become useful, and then that conveyor belt which outputs the iron plate, that's no longer going to be useful. It's just going to be there as a legacy. And as we work our way down, so we've got furnaces creating the molten iron. In here we've got the steel process, so this is creating all of the steel ingots that we need. Then we've got more furnaces creating more molten iron, and then we've got more. This is kind of the second half of the iron ingot process. So I've kind of put the iron ingot process at the start and at the end with steel in the middle. You know, I'm trying to get a good distribution of fluid. I'm trying to get an even flow. So that's kind of the idea. I've tried to come up with a block which can do both jobs, because I don't want to have to come back and, as I said, come back and redo this at some point later in time. And obviously it means I've got this enormous, giant, massive setup of factory units, but you know, this is what you need to deal with. So 36 iron. So I'm getting 3 lots of 36 iron out of the whatever they are, the things dealing with the core fragments. 36 iron ore. So I've got times 3. I've got each of these, and this is what deals with. This is the necessary infrastructure without modules that is required to deal with 36 iron ore. Anyway, carrying on. All of this stuff exits here, and then we got a bit of a gap. So I'm going to start being a little bit more tolerant about gaps. These pipes here, these are the pipes delivering the pyroflux, the sulfuric acid, and the water. So I've got kind of the main ingredients on conveyor belts going down the middle, in the middle of the unit, in the middle of the block, and then I've got pipes going in between the two blocks, and that's how I've kind of fed them through. And I'm going to feed these through. So the plan is to have the exact same again, these same 3 blocks, but being fed by some train stations. And so what I want to do is I want to bring these pipes directly down. We'll have some train stations in the middle here, and then we'll have the exact same block down here dealing with the iron specifically just from the train stations. And I've already routed in the conveyor belts for those extra things, because obviously, you know, I'm building tight together, so I need to have that access to stuff. So these are the 3 conveyor belts dealing with, we're getting 45 iron plate from each, and then these are the 3 which will come from the iron plate coming from the train stations that we were just talking about. These are the 2 steel plates, and these obviously the 2 steel plates coming from the other ones. Yeah, I suppose that's another good thing to mention. I don't really have a temporary process for steel at this moment in time. At this moment in time, I've only got the steel plate that's being produced in the starter factory, and I won't have the any intermediate steel. I'll only have the steel when I get access to ingots. And I haven't really, what I might do is I might just put some furnaces in here just to produce some iron. In the meantime, I can use the coke input that's coming in for the steel as fuel for those furnaces, because I haven't got access to electric furnaces yet. They're still a little bit ways off. So yeah, that's iron. Yeah, I mean, I felt like I got a bit of a good first stab at it with the block that I had to abort with my change of plan. I mean, that change of plan, you know, is this a small base? Is this a small base? I just had a solar flare and it landed up here. That's the closest. Well, I had a solar flare, I don't know, hours and hours and hours ago, and it just kind of passed me by and nothing happened. I had a second one not long ago, and it's landed on that wall, and it landed a few just outside the perimeter wall, so I still feel like this is still technically a small base. But it's still got a long way to go, and it's going to get a lot bigger. Oh, let me go deal with that. So, next thing on the list, after I've dealt with these biters, is computer chips. Need green chips, red chips, blue chips. I need electronic components. I need some greenhouses for wood. Lots and lots of things. So let's crack on. Well, once I've dealt with this anyway. Oh no, 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 no. It's so painful. Got so far to go. Oh, come on! Alright, onwards and upwards. Next. Whew, and that is computer chips. Right. So, and we're gonna explore some real engineering. Okay. So I'm going to bed at night and I'm thinking about this stuff now, and I haven't had this sort of situation for quite some time. Going to bed thinking about while worrying about particular materials, where I'm going to route them through my factory. It's a good place to be. You know, I don't know if you might not remember, but back in the Factorio series, I was like, I'm really craving a situation where Factorio starts beating me up a little bit, and it really feels like that's where we're getting. I'm enjoying it. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's ahead of me, and it's all very exciting. I'm really enjoying this. Anyway, the thing that this particular block, 'cause it's not just doing computer chips anymore. So what I'm worrying about is this. If I can find the recipe, here we go. Is this recipe here, which is basically going to be what my this whole factory, or at least a large portion of it, is going to be built around. You know, it's going to be built around using these materials, because, you know, a patch of ore, they're depleting quickly, whereas one of these things will last forever. So if I can come up with a good factory layout that uses these materials and can extract the maximum out of these core fragments, I think there's a lot to be gained from that sort of scenario. So when I look at this sort of situation, this sort of recipe list, what I'm seeing is multiple. Well, I'm seeing chaos. You know, this is complete chaos. You know, any one of these materials, if it bottlenecks, then it's going to stop anything else from producing. So if we need iron, for example, and we need lots and lots of iron, but we aren't using any copper, then no more iron is going to come out. It's just going to block up on the copper. So each of the ingredients in this recipe, I need to come up with reasonable ways to lose flow. You know, it's reasonable ways to burn up some of this stuff so that it can free up space. In engineering speak, what we're doing is we're building in redundancies. We're building in flows, so we're building in factory units specifically that will eat up excess products, excess flows of stuff, and then it needs to be able to deal with not just a situation where those excess products are the dominant situation and we're getting more copper. So we're using more copper than iron. We need a situation where the factory can deal with that, and we also need the opposite situation. We also need a situation where if we need it to be able to use a lot of iron but not a lot of copper, how do we deal with that sort of situation? And we're not just dealing with iron and copper here. We're dealing with 2, 4, 6, 10 things that we need to be managed. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how do I create some sort of redundancy in the factory that makes use of these materials? So in this particular portion, you might want to, if we go back to episode 1, I was looking at these two recipes for green chips. This one for wood, and this one where we don't use wood but we use this stone tablet instead. And I was looking at them thinking, trying to understand why would we use one over the other. And what I've decided to do is I've decided to use this as one of the sinks for stone, because this is a good place to lose some stone. So if we start at the beginning, right at the bottom of the map, which is where all the green chips are being produced, I've essentially got I'm using twice the amount of copper than I'm actually producing. You know, if we look at these this is the whole green chips. If we look at this in two halves, we've got, this is the middle line. Everything below that is using wood. Everything above that is using copper. And each half will use, what is it? 2/3 of the amount of copper plate that I'm producing. You know, this is a big sink. This is a big place for copper to go. But I've got twice. And this is kind of the redundancy that I mean, because what I want this part of the factory to do is I want, when there's an abundance of stone, I want the factory to send that stone to here, and it will convert that stone into a green chip instead of using wood. And then when I'm in deficit of stone, when I don't have enough stone, then we will create those same green chips. We'll just create them out of wood instead. So those are the two worst case scenarios in my mind. You know, maximum stone, 0 wood; maximum wood, but 0 stone. And so I've kind of designed the factory to be able to do both of those things. And that's what this is. So that's what redundancy. That's what I mean by engineering in my world. You know, redundancy is a case of over designing something, anything, in a way that makes the thing inherently stronger. And sometimes the way that you strengthen or over design it isn't burdensome. Like, it doesn't create too much of too much onerous thing. It's not too onerous on the factory. It doesn't too onerous on the design of the whole thing you are designing. But just a little bit here or there, just an extra capacity here or there, bit of redundancy, a bit extra that we don't need. But you know, that's what is the real engineering we're dealing with here. At least the very beginnings of it. You know, the tip of the iceberg really when we're dealing with the rest of the factory. And also this part of the factory is dealing with 2 of these sorts of situations, because I also want this to deal with copper in the exact same way. So I'm sending every single piece of copper plate that I produce in my factory, I'm sending it here, so that if I have, say, too much copper, then it will just create extra computer chips instead. And I'll have more red chips or more blue chips. You know, I've got extra capacity here to be able to deal with an abundance of copper when I need it to. And you know, what we're actually dealing with is a situation where we're going to have various flows at different times, different scenarios, and this factory it's going to break several times along this journey. I'm going to have sort of scenarios which I haven't considered, which I couldn't have considered, and blocking everything up. I think that's going to be the fun. This recipe, it's just so much potential there, so much good stuff, so much stuff that I would, and it's indefinite. It will last forever. So I don't have to worry about setting up any mining outposts. I can just set these things up. If I can get this right, I just think there's so much to be had from it. But anyway, that's kind of the idea behind this part of the computer chips, this part of the factory. And you know, going forward, I'm going to be looking for other areas where I can build in that sort of redundancy. Like I'm going to have, because of I'm using stone blocks here, I'm going to have to build in extra capacity for stone blocks, so that I've got the regular stone blocks that go to the rest of the factory, and then I've got another section which deals with stone blocks, which is just excess stone blocks, and then those stone blocks get sent here, so that I don't have a permanent supply of stone blocks coming here. We just use whatever excess is being developed. That's the idea, and I'm hoping that I should be able to get the same to do with copper. Now, iron and steel, I don't really know how I'm going to deal with excess with iron and steel, but I do know going forward that I'm going to need a lot of iron and steel just to build the factory. So that, you know, dealing with a moment when I don't need iron and steel and I need all this other stuff, and I need to put iron and steel into some kind of sink. You know, I'm thinking about way too much. This is what I mean. I'm going to bed and I'm worrying about this stuff. Ah, it's good. It's good times. It's good times. Anyway, I need to get on with copper. That's the next thing. And it's more or less going to be the same as this iron and steel block, just much simpler. Much simpler. So, let's get on with it. Move the camera, build some more copper, and then hopefully we can move on. We can move the map up to this half of the factory and start doing some other stuff. Hey. And there we have copper, which is mostly the same as iron and steel, the one we did earlier. You know, I'm doing the same exact thing that I'm doing over there, in that this block should be able to do both the enriched iron to iron plate process. It should also be able to do the enriched iron to molten iron process. It should be able to do both of those things. But obviously it's much smaller because we are no longer dealing with steel. So it can be a much smaller block. And kind of as a result of that, I've been able to fit the or at least most of the second half of the process in the same designated block that I've already built. You know, with iron, because it fits this space pretty well, not perfectly, but as good as it's going to get, I'm going to have to build the same second half down here somewhere. But because iron is smaller, I've been able to get, you know, 2/3 of it in here, and I just need to make the enriched process. And I'm imagining I'm just going to occupy that in this new bus train station. Everything is fluid at the moment, so I'm imagining that I'm going to add some space down, use some of the space down here to add some extra units to finish off this process. And that's to supplement. So we've got the same as what we're doing with iron. So we've got half that deal with the things over the pulverizers, and then half that deal with copper that I'm going to mine out of the ground. And there's one thing that I've just kind of been thinking about, you know, a thing that I went to bed last night and was pondering and kind of thought, that's how I can deal with that problem. So we've got the 6 main conveyor belts for copper plate. So these are the 6 that are coming from these 6 blocks. These 6 will be going from somewhere else, which I'm just about to explain. So the copper comes out of these 6 blocks, comes down here, goes down here. The excess sand goes down this conveyor belt, and then the excess copper ore gets split off and goes down the page. And I've got 2 of these same conveyor belts in iron. I built these 2 conveyor belts in iron knowing that I would need them, but I didn't quite know how I was going to use them. I think I've just kind of figured out how I'm going to use them, and that's what I'm trying to get to. So the point is that these 2 conveyor belts are specifically for excess copper. This is for copper where I'm going to have splitters which split off when they overflow, and any overflow of copper ore that we have in the base is going to be sent here. And then these 2 belts are going to go to a series of furnaces, and I'm going to use the inefficient copper process, the first copper process, the one we have access to, the one I have in my starter factory. I'm going to use that inefficient process to effectively burn that copper ore. And then that copper ore is going to come down these 6 conveyor belts. Obviously, I'm not going to get 6 conveyor belts worth from these two, but I want these 6 conveyor belts to take precedence over the ones coming from here. So any excess copper gets turned into copper plate using the most inefficient process, so it is burnt as efficiently as I can burn it, and then it returns down these conveyor belts and it takes precedence over every other piece of copper that I'm producing. So that's how I'm going to flush out any excess copper that's in the system. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with the iron plate. I'm going to set up some iron furnaces and some steel furnaces to effectively burn any of this excess iron ore that the factory develops, and then route it through the factory in the exact same way, taking precedence over these kind of the molten process. Because that's what we need to do. We need to flush that stuff out, and it needs to take over. It needs to be more important. It is more important. You know, that's one of the lessons that I learned from Angel and Bob. These excess products, they tend to be more important than the primary products. And if you can get the excess products, you know, these 2 conveyor belts might not seem like much, but you know that should be able to take any overflow. And hopefully, by arranging the belts in this way, with it taking precedence and being more important than everything else, it will flush through. And hopefully, it should all be automatic. I shouldn't have to worry about any of it. You know, this should all just take place in the background. Whenever a belt jams up from these pulverizers, it will send any of that excess copper ore here, or anywhere else in the factory that we might be creating it, and the same with iron ore, and then we can burn it. I think that's the best solution. That's what I went to bed last night thinking about. But anyway, we are well over time for this episode. So the plan at the moment, I'm just going to wrap things up. The plan at the moment is to start on some kind of top half of the factory, and I'm seeing these core patches, whatever, core seams. That's the word. And I don't want to demolish them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct the next path above it, and then I'm going to use all of this space as a bus, because I mean ultimately I don't really know what's coming down the future. It would be really nice to have some extra capacity in here, and it would mean that I can get permanent access to 1, 2, 3 of these seams. I've already got permanent access to this one, which is just about which is my start factory, and I've built around it so I can use it. So that's 4 of the seams that I need. That's 2/3 of them. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move the camera up, and we're going to start work on the top half, well away from these seams. That'll give me loads of space for a bus. But for this episode, I think that's well enough. Well enough. Done way too much talking. So I hope it's been good. Till next time.